Right, it's time to go, take too long. Nice and easy one, gentleman right next to you there, Luke. And then a gentleman here with the blue shirt on.
Dick Caswell, when you started, you mentioned about the predictions for the GDP of Britain when we come out of Europe and reducing. Give us predictions of dealing with the rest of the world, the GDP, because it might be a good thing, given that. And also, you obviously would probably remain staying in the European Union, which is very close to the European Union and ever closer. What exactly does that mean? Because it's been predicted we're going to have a European Army, Navy and Air Force. Did you vote for that? Is that what you agree with?
Okay, so on the first point, which was, sorry, I think my brain's starting to, my RAM's filling up. Sorry, my brain's really struggling. Forgive me, what was the first part of your question? Oh, right, DDP, yes, sorry, you're right. So, two reasons why I've not given you DDP figures, and you're absolutely right to pull me up on that. One, we don't know, because trade deals typically take between 7 and 10 years to negotiate. Estimations on those countries where we're furthest along with in terms of having that conversation, so Australia is one of them, China, perhaps India, I've got a list somewhere. Optimistic calculations on those suggest they would give us between 1 and 2% increase in our GDP, which is tiny. Now, I'm not here to say that in a brave new world of Brexit, we could be firing on all cylinders, cracking trade deals from around the world that could eclipse what we have with you. It's possible. But when it comes to the economy, as I say, we'll be all right, Jack. Whatever happens, we will be okay, because our brains and our economic resilience in this part of the world mean we'll be fine. But I am not prepared to play with the financial and economic well-being of parts of the country that can't wait for those magnificent new trade deals to come in 10 years' time. Because if they lose their jobs tomorrow, I'm partly responsible for that. So that doesn't mean I'm not ambitious for the country, but I am risk-averse when it comes to the economic security of the citizens of the UK, and I am not prepared to take that chance.
Ranko Pinter from Orpington. I have been listening with growing anxiety about government statements coming out in recent weeks about the consequences of crashing out from Brexit and all the emergency situation that will have to happen regarding the flights and the travels and the driving licenses and medication stocking up and food. And I think probably finally for those who may have had some doubts before, truth is out. We have been lied to. Brexit is a con. Now, people may say, well, this is not first time that politician lie, yeah? This is in the nature. The only difference this time around...
I'm a frog and I lie.
The only difference is that when politicians lie, they are kicked out in 4 years' time. With this arrangement, we don't have that option.
So, just on the lying thing, I don't. And everybody has a view, don't they? And politicians, I mean, they're lower than what's lower? I don't know, car sales, estate agent, what's worse than a politician? I don't know. There must be some paint salesman. We have a dreadful reputation, and deservedly so. You know, it's not been great in the past. But do I think politicians lie? Did they lie in the referendum? Yes. I'm trying here. I think, I mean, I am very clear-cut. If I don't know, I'll say I don't know, but I certainly don't make stuff up. But there is an art in politics. Politics is sales, isn't it? And it's selling a vision. And I have no doubt that the people who really pushed for Brexit genuinely believe that it could be better and that the country could be better. But we, the majority in this room... Sorry?
I'm not sure Boris did.
Well, yeah, Boris just decided at the last minute, which looked like a likely campaign to win. He went for that one. Anyway. So Boris aside, I genuinely don't think politicians lie, but they believe passionately in something. Is their attention to detail and knowledge of detail that great?
Yeah, but they are ignorant, and if they are ignorant, just as ignorant.
So come on then, join me. The only way we change it, democracy is ours. And I know I say that flippantly, but I had no clue I was going to be an MP at the beginning of 2011. Didn't even enter my head. I got cross, I shouted at the TV, I thought, you lying bugger, I want to get in there and sort it. So, you know, this is how we change it. And there may have been a glass of wine involved, but, of course I you. And I completely forgot what the other part of your question was. It was about lying, was it all about lying?
It was the fact that Brexit...
Oh, the no-deal notices, the stockpile on Marmite and...
Well, it was the fact that people get stuck to this idea that we have to honor the vote. The vote was based on a lie. And as a result of it, if I was buying the car in the same way as Brexit, it would be trade description out that I could return the car based on the
And I can't disagree with that, but politics, unfortunately, isn't as clear-cut as contractual law. It is deliberately waffly because we have no constitution, but it is what it is, and that's why I come back to politicians now have to somehow wrestle the most professional route out of this. And I understand why you'd be suspicious and not altogether trusting, but this is the system we have right now, and we have to do our best with it. And I remember now the other part of your question was about these notices coming out of the government, stockpile on this, that, and the other. Well, they kind of have to do that because they, you know, this is negotiation now, isn't it? This is poker face time with the EU about no deal. Do you want it? But I must admit, I did read the other day, there was an article, I forget which newspaper it was, about that the Cabinet were in shock when we were told that we might have to start owner-operating our own ferries because there wouldn't be enough trade or something. There was some ridiculous, I just thought, no, just... And I do find myself, with some of those no-deal notices, it's a bit like, in the case of losing oxygen in the cabin, don't worry, there will be, you know, things will come down. Should we land on the sea? And you think, oh, it's madness, absolute madness. But democracy has a huge role in this, and we have got to see this process through, I'm afraid.
Heidi, can we have a few more questions and readers?
I'm looking at people, I don't know if the leaders or the reminders, do you know? I'm picking hands.
Push for a bit, so we get a bit more fun.
Mark, this is democracy. People are leave remain, I see people in hands. And my role is to take questions from whoever puts their hand up. If they want to... There we go, that's the question from this gentleman here, and then we'll go to the lady there. But Mark, how am I supposed to know?
I wasn't expecting to ask a question.
There you go.
But based on what this gentleman said, I will. I'm Roger French, I come from Stapleford. I voted to leave. I was interested in going back to the GDP figures, but that was the question I'd like to ask. You came out with some stats earlier on about some pretty gloomy stats, and they're also on your website, I noticed. We've seen a lot of stats, George Osborne, etc., etc. A lot of those have been proved very, very wrong. Would you accept that the stats that you talked about and are on the website are simply predictions? They are simply predictions, and there's a lot of discussion that sort of points to them being quite misleading.
They're over 15 years.
Yeah, over 15 years.
So, shall I explain where those figures came from and where I got them from?
Please.
Okay. So, if you take the microphone, I can't remember who I said yes to next, there's somebody over the back, I think. There we go, thank you, that needs there. So, do you remember about, I think it was 9 months-ish ago? There was this whole thing about, what do they call it? These 58 reports of the different sectors of the effects on Brexit. There was something papers, I forget what they called them, where government had done an in-depth analysis.
Impact assessments.
Thank you. Impact assessment papers, that was it. And there's this whole hoo-ha in Parliament about whether MPs should be allowed to see them or not. And they basically, an assessment had been done on every single sector in the country of the economy, chemicals, financial services, you name it, it was all assessed. And there was a reading room that was set up, a private reading room where MPs could go along and read them. And I went to that. All very secure, you have to show you left your bag, your phone, they frisk you, they make sure you can't take anything in to write anything down, you have to go and sit. And I went through I spent hours in there, industry by industry, sector by sector, and they have spoken to sector bodies, to leading organisations, to economic experts, and they have modelled every part of the economy. I mean, we're talking files, half the length of this room in terms of the detail. And it's been built up from that. It's analysis, not predictions, it's analysis.
Wrong, consistently wrong.
In your opinion, can we not have heckling, please, from the front row? Let me try and answer the question. It's analysis. Unless you think that every civil servant, every economist has no skill in analysis and they are just modelling and predicting, if that's what you believe, that's absolutely fine and that's okay. But I trust the civil servants who have nothing in my experience other than the highest levels of professionalism to talk to economists, to talk to businesses. They're not talking to people who just think about stuff, they're talking to people who do it and run these sectors. And it's based on the level of interaction they have with the EU now, and if that were not there, if those relationships were not there around customs, tariffs, skill, movement, frictionless, friction-free trade, what would the difference be? If you took the EU out of that equation, what would the difference be? And that's where those figures came from. Massive piece of analysis. It can't all be wrong.
Right, it's not free trade.
Forgive me?
It's not free trade agreement.
So I don't follow.
It's not a free trade agreement with Germany and Italy. You have to pay into a club.
Yes, and that's all taken into it. So it's taken the status quo, what is it now, how is it now, what do we pay, what do we pay out, what is the impact on that particular sector, pharmaceuticals, whatever it might be. I mean, there was literally everything in there. There was paint, there was motor manufacturing, you name it. And what would it do if you took the EU out of that equation? What would that sector look like now? And that is, and that is my job, to look at that stuff. And my degree is in astrophysics, so analysis is second nature to me. That's what I was trained to do. And I follow the numbers through. I didn't just flick through to the summary and, the conclusion page. I tracked the numbers through to make sure I was content with it. And that's why I feel confident that it's analysis, not predictions. Because analysis is based on facts.
Hello Heidi, I'm Monica Jacko from Stapleford. The first point I'd like to make is to remind everyone of what Sth MP said last week at the People's Vote campaign. What about informed consent? If we had, as a patient, we're choosing an operation about a year before operation, we would agree in principle to be put on a waiting list for an operation. Then, a year later, 2 years later perhaps, we might be on the operating table, about to go in the operation, and then we'll be given an informed consent form to sign. Isn't the People's Vote campaign requesting informed consent in the same way? So the first referendum was an advisory. We, I think, deserve a second referendum so that we can make an informed dissent based on information that we are going to be given, which we would like to, but that's the first point I want to make. Secondly, I work in the NHS, and 30% of the staff in our organisation are from non-UK EU nationalities, and we're doing our utmost to support our staff. NHS organisations are looking at the costing of paying for our EU staff to have EU settled status. So we're thinking about that. I'm concerned that Matt Hancock is only thinking about 6 weeks of stockpiling of medicines when he was talking at the committee. But my question I want to ask you, what are your feelings about US corporations managing parts of the NHS, we believe, in the event of a hard Brexit or no deal? Thank you.
So the first part about informed consent, Sarah's doctor, so absolutely follows her kind of professional approach, how she would do things. And I, my husband Phil, who's a sales professional by trade, the analogy that he gives me is, so you asked us to get this product, this really complicated product that nobody had ever asked for before. There was no spec out there. I had a rough idea what it was going to cost. Right, we're doing it now. I tell you what, it's more expensive than we realised. And actually, it hasn't quite got all the requirements you asked for. But it's got these instead. Do you still want to buy it? So the analogy there is similar. I take all those arguments, but I still feel, you know, we didn't, on our referendum, you know, we will implement what you vote. We didn't say, you know, a doctor would say to you, right, I'm going to do your test, take your blood, and then the day before your operation, I'll give you this consent form. We didn't say that then. And I just don't think we can introduce that as a new criteria. I still come back to, I know you'll think we're lying frogs, but it's Parliament's role is going to have to be to negotiate us, to manage us through that. And if the deal is not there, if it falls apart, then it will be Parliament that takes that decision. And that may end up at people's vote, but I just don't think we can, I suppose the way to describe it, I don't think we can take out steps of the process. We have to get there because the genie is so damaging potentially. We can't fast track. It has to, and that's why I didn't go to the people's vote, March. Not least because it was Phil's birthday and he wanted to see ELO at the O2. Well, that's a nice thing actually. A lot of hits. It's not about MPs, it's about people. The people have to want this so that we have that information, we have that knowledge about how people feel, and then if Parliament comes to a no-deal kind of gridlock, then we take that step forward, but I don't think you can circumvent it. And your other question was more about the NHS. So I suppose, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the heart of your question is, are we going to privatise the NHS? With US companies coming in and doing stuff? No, never. Not under this government. Absolutely not. Brian? No hacking. So absolutely not. Is the NHS going to be, personally I'd put the taxes up, I think we need to fund it properly, but do I think whatever happens with the EU in terms of Brexit, will that massively transform how we run the NHS, how it is paid for? No, I don't think it will. I genuinely don't think it is, because our principles are absolutely free at the point of offering, and that won't change. Brexit's got nothing to do with that. It's more, for me, around regulation, medicines and staff and that type of thing. They're the bigger worry areas. Right, two more who we've got, and thank you all for your patience, by the way. So there's a lady just here, and then probably what I'll do is I think there's time for pushing out. I might do two final ones from here and two final ones from there, if that's okay. Even I've got you. There's a young man here, so if you take those two from this side, then we'll
Gavin Lyons from Carpen. I want to know why we're talking about a second referendum. Because when we say that, we're promoting the idea that 52-48 is the only and final statement that British people have ever made about Europe. If we have another referendum, and I totally agree with the informed consent analogy and the sales analogy, that we should do that, it would be a third one. And I think we need one, because, you know, this talk of soft-boiled and hard-boiled eggs, that metaphor makes it sound very wholesome. But thank you for also being very clear that what we're really talking about is different degrees of self-harm that the country is going to undergo. And you are, and I don't envy you your job at all, I can see you are trying to draw a line. How much self-harm am I, as a Member of Parliament, prepared to take responsibility for letting the country inflict on itself? And how bad does the self-harm have to be before I say, no, I'm not prepared to endorse that, let's ask for the consent? And I think, you know, the fact that we're even talking about Parliament knowingly inflicting harm on the country is on its own justification for calling another referendum, a third referendum.
So, I agree with you. I would like to rewind the clock back, get rid of the hangover, and say this never happened. But let me remind us again, we are in a bubble here. England voted to leave. We have to somehow find a way through this and respect that. We have to. It was rubbish. In your view, it was messy, it wasn't clear, there were lies, whatever it is. But I just think if we ignore that,
Why are we ignoring the first referendum then?
we're not ignoring the first referendum.
We are.
Oh, right, okay. I can't blame you for that one. That was the year I was born. But we have to deal with the facts of where we are today and now. And I know, as I say, it's a bumpy plane journey. There are side winds coming in, people's vote, Trump, we're not even spoken about him, DUP, all of this stuff is battering us around. But I genuinely believe we have to land somehow, take whatever effect these have on what that deal might be, and then Parliament makes a decision. I just don't think you can short-step that process, I really don't, much as it pains me. But that would then be Parliament and the government saying, yes, we're telling the people what we're doing. Thank you very much, but actually, and that's a bit dangerous, isn't it? I don't want to be in a government that does that.
That's what you do every day.
Gentlemen.
I'm Alec from Caxton. I'm one of the young people that everyone talks about.
Would you like to go to the Tory Party?
For me, the biggest issue, and what I think a lot of my friends think is the biggest issue, is that I'm applying to university this year, and then I'm going to want to get a job and get a house and actually live a life. And there's a lot of issues surrounding those things that aren't being looked at and aren't being thought about. And I don't want to take the conversation away from Brexit, but the biggest problem with Brexit is that Brexit's taking the conversation away from that. There's so many things coming out about, I'm 18 and I'm worried if I could ever even afford a house. Rates of homelessness have increased hugely. Food bank usage has gone up massively. There's so many issues and there's so many important things that are going on in the country, but all we're looking at is damage limitation. What's the least amount of self-harm we can inflict on ourselves? And for me, as someone going into politics, I study at an A-level, I want to do it next year as a degree, I want to go into things and make a difference, and that's something I'm passionate about, but it feels like nothing's being done for me or for my friends or any of the people that I know, and that's obviously incredibly difficult. And then you bring in the question of, what party is there to represent me? What party is there that's going to push that interest when no one seems to be talking about it? No one's doing anything about that. And for me, that's the biggest problem with Brexit, because none of this is the European Union's fault. It all comes from us, out of this own country. And I think a lot needs to be thought about and a lot more needs to be said.
To answer that bit over there was the lady, I think, was one of the other questions about all the other stuff that we should be talking about, which is essentially what you're saying. So you're right, Brexit, certainly from a parliamentary time and civil servant capacity point of view, absolutely has reined everything in terms of how quickly we can do other things. But I would honestly, and you know me hopefully by now, but I do speak honestly enough, I think the government's got something wrong, I'll say it. I honestly do see focus on other areas. There is a green paper at the moment, after a slightly car crash manifesto, of how we're going to deal with paying for social care and healthcare in the future. They are looking at that at the moment. In terms of house building, massive programme, they've just released the cap on local authorities so that we can borrow more to build more council housing. So all this stuff is going on. We are looking at a long-term settlement for the NHS. The difficulty is, that's not exciting in the media, so you just don't get to hear about it. But trust me when I tell you, and I mean this sincerely, there is a lot of other stuff going on, more slowly than we would like, absolutely. And we're not doing, I suppose you could try and shout about it as much as we wanted to, but all that Pest and Laura Coons would want to talk about is, what's going on with Brexit and whether Theresa May was allowed to stay for dinner or not, or sent home. So unfortunately it does get drowned out, but reassure me, let me reassure you genuinely, I mean that sincerely, there is a lot of other work going on. But certainly from a budget point of view, wings are a little bit clipped in terms of what money we have, because we have to prepare for a serious drop in our GDP should things go badly wrong. But I hope you've heard enough today to say that everybody who has any power in this is going to do absolutely everything they can to make sure that doesn't happen. So let's take 2 final questions from this side. Have you changed your mind, Evelyn? You took your hand up then. So Evelyn on front now has been trying. Oh, this is going to be really mean now. Let's choose. You set your right hand. Okay, gentleman there with the red shirt on. Orange top.
Hello, Heidi. Thanks for the responses that you sent to my various emails. Much appreciated. I want to pick you just up on one point before my main question. A short while ago, you said that you and your other colleagues in the government do things the right way. I think it was completely disrespectful that those 3 people from the government went to Brussels and tried to do things on their own account, when in fact you've clearly said that Theresa May is working her socks off to do everything, and I think it was completely disrespectful that they probably didn't intend to, but I think that's completely undermining what...
You think they didn't intend to?
Pardon?
You think they didn't intend to undermine it? Very jealous.
But anyway, my main point, I think this whole process is like a steamroller out of control and no idea where it's going to end up. The referendum result was really clear. If it was any other sort of election, there wouldn't have been a sufficient majority to actually carry that forward. But with the democracy we have, the government have had to follow the result of that referendum. However, the lady here, who works in the NHS, made a very valid point, and that is, the referendum question was very, very clear. It was either in or out, right? And all the campaigning that went on only ever spelled out the significant and salient points. All this money was going to come back into the coffers, so the NHS deficit can be wiped out, right? We can control our own laws, we can control our own borders. No one ever spoke about the disadvantages of leaving the EU. It was all about how well off we're all going to be. And so it was very, very specific in the questions it asked. But in my view, and I'm sure a lot of the people in the country feel, we weren't sufficiently informed. And I think at the point we're at now, whatever terms are offered to Theresa May in the final analysis, I don't think she has the right to sign anything off without the people having a say whether they agree to that final decision. Because it's in the interest of everyone in the country, right, to know what is being signed up for on their behalf.
Okay, so I suppose that goes back to what I tried to describe earlier, that it's that balance, isn't it, between the people, democracy, the executive government and parliament, and you know, we couldn't exist as a country by referendum. I mean, can you think it's slow now? We never get anything done. So the point is, and I believe, and that's where the meaningful vote will come in, that we fought so hard for in December, really hard, and by a whisker we got it, because that is making sure we're reining back a little bit there. And we've heard about Henry VIII powers, reining back a little bit from the government. So yes, it's absolutely right. Of course they went to undermine it. Of course they did. Oh, look at the cameras, they're amazing now. But reining back the government, the Prime Minister is absolutely the person to negotiate it. Not Parliament, okay? Parliament, our role is to represent you, all 650 of us, and that is our job. And only if we fail, no deal, crash out, can't reach a point of acceptance in the House of Commons, then I think you move it back down the democratic chain. That sounds wrong, I'm just nitpicking, obviously more important, you know what I mean? But we have to go through those processes. So right here and now, Prime Minister's doing a job, bring it to Parliament, meaningful vote, MPs, good enough, yes, not good enough, and only then will we know the outcome of that and whether we need to go back to people. But we can't do that every time. I genuinely believe that, and I am a Ramona of the highest order, but We can't just keep, that genie is too dangerous to unleash that easily, it really is. We have got to do everything we possibly can to avoid that. And that means MPs manning up, looking at themselves in the mirror and going, actually, is this good enough? What are the risks? What else could go wrong? Scotland, all of that stuff, and making that decision. And only if we fail in our job do we then put it back to the people.
But do you think it's right to rely on just the fact that the people in Westminster think it's a reasonable deal?
Well, you're MPs, that's our job.
600,000 or 700,000 people in London recently. They're not listening to the will of the people.
But our democracy is imperfect, but it is based on MPs representing their constituents. If you think we're rubbish, kick us out next time, but we can't mix up the rules now and suddenly say that MPs actually, you know what, we don't trust them this time, let's go back to the people. You just can't operate like that. I understand the frustrations, I really do.
But it'll be too late, Heidi. You look, if Parliament votes this through and votes knowingly for massive self-harm...
They won't, Brian, they won't. Parliament, I tell you now, will not vote for no deal. Full stop. It won't happen. Guaranteed.
But there's an intermediate, isn't there, where you will vote.
Well, I don't know. We don't know.
A modicum of self-harm, which is wrong. Edmund Burke.
I can't speak for all my colleagues, and that's why today for me was not so much about a grand speech of my kind of final resting place, but more just describing what I know about the different dynamics in Parliament and what might not be possible. No deal, no way. And then after that it gets a little bit woollier, but I can tell you where my borderline is. A Norway type deal, I'd probably accept that. Anything less than that, forget it. And that's my choice. And I did say a final question to Evelyn on the row. So make it a cracker.
Heidi.
Put your microphone up.
Right, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
That's unlucky. Okay, so one of the things that I haven't heard here today at all is anything that's conciliatory. I think that people are forgetting that we do need, and I voted out, and I will stand up and say I voted out, but the time for actually saying and vilifying us for that stance surely is over. We are a few weeks away from actually reality, and that reality is that we need 17 million people to have goodwill and move us forward where we are. And I'd like to know, Heidi, how your unenviable job now, how you're going to heal our community, because we are so split.
So, and this is, the even bigger question that the Prime Minister has, which is not just her constituency, but the whole lot, which I think this is an unenviable task. I don't want to be in her shoes. But we do that, and we do that by trying to be professional, trying to communicate fully about the decisions we're making in Parliament and why, about weighing all the risks, the opportunities, and it's not ideal, but trusting MPs to really think hard about that. This isn't flippant, and that's what makes me cross with the likes of Boris and Jacob Rees-Mogg, because I think to them it is a little bit of a game. It's a power game, because neither of those people personally can imagine the effect on some people's lives. They're just not in the same world as the rest of us, and that's why I do take exception in particular to those two. But by and large, MPs have to decide. It's probably the biggest decision and vote we will have in decades. We've got to do our damnedest to get it right and be respectful. And I love Anna to death, Anna Soubry, but do I think she goes a bit fast sometimes? Yes, I do. Because we can't be whipping this stuff. I'm interested in pragmatism, economic sense, the right decision. It's all I'm interested in. I'm not interested in whipping up fear, Project Fear, whatever you call us. But what I am going to do is give you the facts and tell you what I think the risks are. But we need to, where possible, try and keep emotion out of it a little bit. I mean, was it the Prime Minister said called Carpen? And we have to try and do that. But we have to find a way, because this is our country and it's not a game. I'm going to call it to a close now, if that's okay, because we've only got the hall until now, in fact. But thank you very, very much for coming, all your questions. If there's anybody who had a burning question that I didn't get round to picking your, when you had your hand up, you all know where I am on email, please just drop me a line. And my plan, as I say, is to do at least one, if not two more of these, because I think the swell of people's interest and wanting to know when we do get that deal, whatever it will be enormous. So I will, we've already spoken to Salisbury to try and get one at the other end of the constituency, so I'll definitely be doing at least one, if not two or more of these. So thank you very much for coming and have a lovely weekend.